Welcome everyone, I'm Eva and I'm a member of Women in Tech Oslo, and I'm happy to see so many people joining today's online meetup about building an agile culture. Today we have a pleasure to host Christina and Andrea from Miles, who will share their experience about how to be agile and how to implement some agile methods into the company. But before I give them a word, I would like to present Women in Tech in very briefly. So our vision is to build a community where women can improve their technical skills and decide if the tech career is for them or not, as well as they can also improve what they already know and become better professionals. We do it by organizing monthly events, which are like hands-on workshops, and once a year we organize a bigger conference. Our meetups are open for everyone, regardless of gender, age, or nationality. So for you, it would be great if you join us, because we have built quite a big community. We have currently 2,300 members, which are both professional and students. So it's a great place to network, as well as to, for example, become a speaker if you would like to start your career as a speaker. So if you would like to join our team, please send us an email to talent@vitoslo.com and we will contact you back. As well as if you just want to see what's going on in our community, please follow us on our social media, which is like list here, Vit Oslo or hellovitoslo.com. Now, I would like to give word back to Andrea and Christina, and hello, and I hope you will enjoy. And one thing more, I'm sorry, I forgot. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section in YouTube, and we will bring them out at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that introduction, Eva. It's nice also to see a little bit more about women in tech. So some of you might know that this meetup was actually scheduled in March, and we were supposed to welcome you into our office at Miles. But as you all know, that was canceled, and now we're online instead. But still, even though we're not welcome you in our home, so to speak, I would still like to just tell you a little bit about Miles, because the philosophy of our company is well aligned with today's topic of values. So this is us, or at least a snapshot in time of us a couple of years back. We've been around since 2005, and we are mostly growing by opening up on new locations. And as you can see here, most of them are in Norway. The reason why I want to tell you about Miles today is because, as it says here, we are a value-based IT company. But what does that mean? Well, we have two values, professional authority and warmth. And to us, it's more than just some words on a slide set, as you can see here. It's something that we use actively, and it's a big part of our culture. For instance, we use this heavily in our recruitment process to make sure that we find the people that fit our culture and our people and the way that we work. And you can actually also see these values manifested in the way that we act. One example is that we hug a lot. And that's maybe not what you would expect from an IT company, mostly men as well. But it is a way for us to show that we care. So that is one way that our values influence the way that we act. Personally, I also use these values to guide me. So when I'm in doubt, I use professional authority and warmth to guide me to making good decisions. So to me, they are very, very helpful. So that is just a little teaser on how values can actually help you build your culture. But now, over to this event with the overarching theme, building an agile culture. So today you will listen to two talks, one by me and one by Andrea. And afterwards, we'll do a Q&A session where I think Andrea and me will still do most of the talking, but hopefully we can all share experiences. So please use the question section, both for questions, but also to share your experience and things that others can learn from. But by now, it's probably about time that we introduce ourselves. So Andrea, do you want to go first?
Yes, I can start. Hello, my name is Andrea. I work as an Agile coach in Miles, and I started out as a developer and have experience from many different roles in software development. I was introduced to Agile ways of working in 2007, and I have helped teams and organizations to adapt to more Agile ways of working since then. And even when working with traditional project management, I have tried to include Agile ways of working. And last couple of years, I worked as an Agile coach. And I look forward to this sharing session with all of you today. That's me. Christina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I do. So my name is Christina. I also work in Miles as an Agile coach. And since I first heard about Scrum as a developer back in 2005, I've been interested in basically all things Agile. And since that day, which I'm sad to say is now actually 15 years ago, which makes me feel very old. But since that day, I have learned that Agile is so much more than just a method to develop good software. So I'm really excited that we get to host this meetup today with a topic that I'm very passionate about. And I know that your meetups here in Women in Tech are usually more technical, but today will be on the soft side. But I do think that the things that we will discuss is equally important for you to be happy and to be able to do a good job. Whether you're a developer, tester, work with UX, or a leader or some other role within tech. So from my point of view, this is a topic that just becomes more and more important. So we'll start with an overview of what an Agile culture is. Then we will go a little bit deeper, showing you some things that you can do to build the culture that you want. And in the end, as we said, we'll do a Q&A session to hopefully dig a bit or even deeper. But before we go into the talks, let's just briefly define culture, seeing as that is what we will focus on today. And then I would like you all to go to menti.com and use this code that you can see here and answer one question. How do you define culture? So basically, when I say culture, what do you think about? And then we'll look at the results together.
Yeah, we have some answers. It says common set of goals, habits, routines.
And we will use Menti throughout this presentation. So we'll probably use a bit of time to get it up and running this first time. But if you just keep menti.com open, you'll get new codes throughout the talk.
There you see. What happens when no one is looking? Something that all people in the company supports and look upon to. Social behavior and norms. Lifestyle. Ways of working, yeah. Behavior. Values, leadership, work processes, goals, workplace environment. A way of, a way of doing things shaped by the environment. Not weather environment, yeah. Surroundings, people, symbols, artifacts that people use and share. Attitude, yes. Let me see, there was another one here. Unwritten code of conduct, how things are done and people act. norms for interacting, collective ideas and customs, a combination of mindset. It disappeared again. Let me see. Where did it go? Here, combination of mindset, interpersonal dynamics, and energy.
Okay, that's very good. I think we have a bit of a taste of what we think about when we talk about culture.
Yes.
So I actually clicked too fast, so I saw that someone was cheating and they took this definition, but I really like this quote. It says that culture is what people do when no one is looking. And it seems that we are pretty aligned on what culture is, and many of you even mentioned it, that this means that our culture is basically the sum of our actions. It's how we behave. And the reason why we wanted to reflect a little bit about culture is because it's really hard to describe. It's something that we just know, and we can sort of feel it, maybe even smell it. And it's good to reflect a little bit about what culture is before we start talking about how we can change that culture together. So it's how we behave and the things that we do. And today we're going to talk about building an agile culture. So how do we behave when we are agile? Well, we are curious, we experiment and we test a lot, and we want fast feedback, which means that the things that we build and deliver are usually small. When we fail, because we will eventually, we're met with a desire to learn, no finger pointing or blame games. So in an agile culture, we are open to change and we adapt accordingly as we learn. There's a lot more that I could say, but hopefully this gives you an idea of what an agile culture could look like, because hopefully no cultures are the same. So we are ready for the first talk of today. So in an agile culture, we are curious, we experiment, we sometimes fail, and we hopefully always learn. And values is one thing that affects our actions. So that is why we want to start off today's meetup with a talk about values and why they are so important when you want to become agile. Many of you might have seen this before. It's the beginning of what we know as Agile today. It's called the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. And it was written back in 2001. And it says something about what we value. And that tells us how to behave presented with options and problems. And basically what it says is that we value the stuff here on the left side over the stuff on the right side. To give you some examples, if we value working software, we will not start with the long requirement specifications and sort of detailed requirements up front. We'll start building software instead and actually getting it all the way out to production and get the fast feedback that we were talking about. And then we document it when we know that it's working and it is what we actually need or what actually solves the problem. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. If you truly live this, you focus on how we work together and how we interact. So Agile is not about the tools. One tool won't make you Agile. You might not need tools at all, actually. And the ones that you choose, they should help you, not sort of dictate the way that you work. Another example is modern Agile. You could say that it's an attempt to modernize the manifesto, and this is also based on 4 values. It says to make people awesome, deliver value continuously, make safety a prerequisite, and experiment and learn rapidly. So if you focus on this, make people awesome, you do whatever you can to make people work or do their best work to enable them to actually have fun at work and thrive, instead of focusing on control and reporting and other mechanisms that might not make people awesome. Another attempt of modernizing the manifesto is called the Heart of Agile. And here we see the same 4 values that guide our behavior: collaborate, deliver, reflect, and improve. If you have values that says reflect and improve, that should say something about how you act, that you actually set aside time to work with improvement in a good way. It's not just something that you do on the side. It's something that you actually focus on and have as a big part of your way of work. My last example is from SAFE. SAFE stands for Scaled Agile Framework. And there are many arguments whether this is actually agile at all, but that is a totally different talk. So I won't go into that today. But they also have 4 core values, which is built-in quality, transparency, alignment, and program execution. So it's pretty safe to claim that values are at the core of Agile, as you've seen from these examples. So when we are Agile or want to become Agile, values are important and they should guide us. Yet, when we talk about Agile, we tend to talk about methods and frameworks and which to choose. And we spend our time arguing over which method is best. It's basically a buzzword jungle. So should we use Scrum or should we use Kanban? Or when we scale, should we use less or should we use SAFE? And just a note, if these words or buzzwords are unknown to you, please make a comment and then we can clarify them afterwards so that you get the message. But I won't give it or go into the different methods now. But these are different methods within the Agile umbrella. And as I said, we tend to argue on which is best. And when we don't talk about methods, we talk about different practices and mindset. Most of you are probably familiar with the term DevOps or autonomous teams, or maybe you practice test-driven development. So we talk about these and we try to implement them as our way of work. It seems we talk less about why we want to use Agile. Agile is not the goal. It's a means to reach your goal. It's a way for you to create better outcomes. So what is your vision? Which objectives do you have? It's really hard to choose the right flavor of Agile if you don't have a good grasp of what it is that you want to achieve. So say you choose Scrum, as many do. Why should your teams work this way? What will be better as opposed to the way that you work today? How will Scrum help you? If you don't have these answers or reflect on them, you'll easily fall into a cargo cult trap where you have teams doing all of the ceremonies in Scrum that some of you might know, stand-ups, demos, retrospectives, but nothing really changes. There is no improvement in sight. So this is important. Connect your way of work to your vision and your objectives, the outcomes that you seek and want. Know which capabilities you need to build in your organization to get there, because it's first then that you can choose the right flavor of Agile and know how to apply it. So say your objective is to become more innovative. Well, then Scrum might not be the way to go. Maybe you should focus more on lean startup or practice getting good at running design sprints. Is your objective to be a fast mover? Well, then you need to build the capability of decentralized decisions. So focus on building autonomous teams and what it requires of your organization to support these teams. We'll get back to that later, but that is hard work and will probably require your whole organization to change. So what I'm saying and what I want you to take away from this part of the presentation is stop talking about the different methods and don't implement a framework and just expect the magic of Agile to come flowing through your organization. Instead, talk about your vision and what you want to achieve. And then later on, use the different methods and practices to help you get there. But even if you do all this, I'm sad to say it's not enough. Your Agile transformation or journey will most probably still fail. Why? Well, you will not get the effect that you seek if you don't have the culture to support it. Remember the values? What are your values? And what leadership style do you encourage? You can't expect to get autonomous teams if you have a leadership style of management with control and command. It simply does not compile. Let me give you some examples of what this foundation could look like to support your Agile mindset and your practices. Because to truly live these values, to actually walk the talk, you need the right leadership style and mindset to support it in all parts of your organization. So when I talk about leadership here, I don't only mean top management. We are all leaders in our work. So it's a leadership style within the whole company. So as I said, to truly have autonomous team, where is that here? We need to have decentralized decisions. And that requires trust and transparency. And servant leadership is a style that fits the environment and will help you to actually live and use your values. And to work with improvement in a good way, you need to apply a good dose of systems thinking. It doesn't help you a lot if your improvements are a sub-optimization. So you need to look, when you work with improvement, you need to look at the whole system. And a system in this context could be one of your processes, or maybe a whole department, or the whole company. But you need to look at the whole system and improve with the system in mind, not the different parts. So this is some examples on how you really need to focus on your foundation to actually get these methods that we usually think about when we talk about Agile to work and to get the effect that you seek. So now I have been talking a lot about values, and finally it's your turn. Because I hope that you agree with me by now that values are important. And we would really, really like to know what your company values or team values, if you have some, are, and how they affect your everyday work. So again, we would like you to go into Menti and use the code that you see here. And answer first the question, what are your company values? We'll take a look at that. And then afterwards, let us know how they affect your everyday work.
So here we see some values that are in your company: boldness, transparency, freedom. If you didn't get the code from the start, you can see it here as well. So go to menti.com and you type in the code 5602 and 97. We have some more. It says competence, quality, independence, integrity, collaboration, trust is there, innovation, courage, independence, competence. Freedom is in the middle. Several people have that, and trust. Collaboration is also there. Boldness, creativity, responsibility,
I guess we can also share these afterwards if people are interested in seeing what everyone answered.
Being present is there as well. I think the ones that are most coming up several times are the ones with the larger text. So trust in the middle there, that's good that many of you have that. Transparency, freedom, integrity, independence. So those seems to be the main values. We can continue with the next. So it's the same code. I'll go to the next question. how do these values that you now just put up there affect your everyday work? That's the next question. How do they affect your everyday work? So the alternatives are not at all. We talk about them every now and then, but we don't actively use them. And the last alternative, we actively use our values and talk about them a lot. So we see how it moves. It's most of you seems to be actively using your values, and that's a very good thing. Talking about them, but don't actively use them is, yeah, it's quite a few there as well, like a little bit less than half of you. Not using them at all, no one has answered that yet, so that's also a good thing. Yeah, it seems to be about 40-60.
Exactly 40-60 right now, actually.
Okay, exactly. Yeah, looked away for a while.
Cool.
Good.
So that means that most of you actually use your values actively and talk about them. And that's really good. And I hope that that means that they also sort of affect the way that you behave and that you could really see it in your processes and yeah, basically your culture. That is really good. Thank you so much for answering. It's good for us to know a little bit about how you see these things that we talk about today. To round off this talk, I would like to look at some, I've called it anti-patterns. I don't know if that is right, but that's what I've called them, that I've experienced or heard about in different places. And I would like us to reflect a little bit together on why these patterns will not work. And I think that for most of you, seeing as 60% already said that you live your values, you probably don't have these anti-patterns, but they could be in other parts of your organization. And I think that it's good to be aware of them because sometimes we talk about values, but as we said, we don't really use them. So that is why I would like to go through some things. And some of you might recognize it, and for some of you, it's totally unheard of. So the first anti-pattern. Your leadership style is one of command and control. So in your organization, you send clear and detailed missions down in the organization. So it's very top down. You have rigid processes to get deliveries approved and eventually delivered. So that means that it probably takes a really, really long time from the moment where you have an idea until it is all the way out in production. And you also have a regime for reporting that everyone is expected to follow. So this is basically your management style. And then you proclaim that you want to develop software through autonomous teams. But the teams are told what to do, and also sometimes even how to do it, with little or no influence over their own processes and product or the service that they're developing. So that means that you can't just take a good practice and sort of insert it into your organization. For this to actually work, it's not enough to just talk about autonomous teams. You need to work with your leadership style first to create the right environment for these teams to thrive. So autonomous teams is something that many talk about, but I think very few of us actually were there. So it's something that you can strive to achieve, but it really won't happen overnight, and certainly not if you don't work on changing your processes. That means the way that you work and your leadership style at the same time to get to where you want to be. So that is the first anti-pattern that you could be aware of, where there's sort of a mismatch between the values that you talk about and things that you actually do. A while ago, or next pattern, a while ago, I read a great blog post from a guy called Marty Kagan. If you want to read it, the link is down here. And where he basically talks about how he is now disencouraging the use of OKRs. And some of you might not know what OKRs are. So first, let's do the world's quickest intro to OKRs so that you know what it is. So it stands for objective and key results. And it's basically a way for teams and individuals to set goals that are ambitious, so-called stretch goals. And it helps you to define measurable results. And these measures can be used to track progress and to create alignment amongst many teams and levels in an organization. So it's very good to use or in smaller organizations as well, but especially in big ones, to create alignment and to make sure that we actually pull in the same direction. And what Marty Kagan describes are companies having so-called feature teams. These companies sometimes describe their product development as a factory that just spews out features. So the teams, or these feature teams, they have no full responsibility for a whole product or a whole service. So they are not what we call empowered product teams. And then you insert OKRs into this feature factory. And this is a technique that comes from Google, where you have the right environment to use this kind of goal setting, where you have the right conditions, so to speak, the right environment, the culture, right, that we talked about. And OKRs, they're meant as an empowerment technique for product teams. And instead, it ends up being a way for management to set objectives and measure progress, using a new buzzwordy name, but doing it the same way as they always used to, not really changing a thing. So if this sounds familiar, or if you're curious, you could read about it. As I said, it's a really good blog post. And I think, again, it's a good example on how we think that copying a ritual or framework from someone else will give us magic results. But without the right foundation and the culture to support it, the attempt will probably fail. Last pattern. In your organization, you talk a lot about transparency and how you want the teams and projects to be transparent in their work. And that could be in form of reports, or maybe you have visual boards like you can see here throughout your office. Maybe you have burn down charts in Jira, or maybe you do demos. There are many, many ways to be transparent. But basically the word is that the teams should be transparent in what they do. At the same time as you encourage this transparency, management are the ones who have all the information. There might be steering group committees or C-level or below meetings where little information is shared with the rest of the organization. So you say that you want transparency bottom up, but in this anti-pattern, there is little transparency top down. To really be transparent and to live this value, it has to go both ways. That is what will give you the effect that you actually seek from transparency. So if you do this both ways, you will avoid that, what I've seen in some places, that everyone talks about transparency, but most people are afraid to share. And you can't really say that you have transparency and openness if people are afraid to show what they're working on at an early stage. What they're working on could be a document, it could be a presentation, or it could be a piece of functionality. So if you see that people are afraid to share at an early stage, that could be a sign that you have this anti-pattern. Another way this can display in your organization is that most information is on a need-to-know basis, so they actually need to ask for permission. Say you want to see the presentation that was used in the C-level meeting or in the steering committee of your project. You may be fine, if you're lucky, you may be fine the document, but you have to ask permission to get to view it. So in this anti-pattern, default is that information is sort of shut down unless you have permission. But if you have transparency as a value, then default should be that everything is open, except of course from some documents that's really, really sensitive. But most of the information should be available to you at all time and easy to find. There are probably many other examples that I could use, but I hope that these few ones show you that you can't just take a method or framework, implement it, and expect to become agile. You actually need to work on your values and also your leadership style in all levels of the organization. So again, this is not just management, but leadership in the team. It could be leadership in form of being really good at what you do. And that is where you need to work to get the outcomes that you're seeking. So you need to start with your foundation, as we saw in the house that I drew earlier. But how on earth do you do that? And how do you work with like really living your values? Well, luckily we'll not leave you hanging, because Andrea will now talk a little bit about how an Agile coach can help you drive your desired change and how you can contribute. So that was it for the first talk. I'll give the word over to Andrea.
Thank you, Christina. So I will talk about how an Agile coach helps to build your company culture. And I will give you some simple but powerful techniques that you can use in your team. First, I want to talk about what coaching is. Coaching is all about helping people to reach their full potential. As coaches, we take a stance that all people are capable of finding their own solutions, have their own answers, make their own choices. And when they make mistakes, they are perfectly able to learn from this and develop. In other words, we are naturally creative, resourceful, and capable of finding our own solutions. So why would you need a coach, you might ask? Well, we all have blind spots, and the coach can help you in your own process by holding up a mirror so that you can see yourself from a different perspective. And this can help you in your development, learning, and growth. As an Agile coach, we have a number of tools and techniques that we can use to influence culture and enhance values in an organization. And we typically help teams and individuals in those teams to reach better business outcomes. The competency framework that you see here, presented by Dandy people and also used by Adventures with Agile, we see we can choose to operate in different axes. For example, we might do a lot of facilitation by facilitating workshops, or we can do teaching or training, or sometimes we do mentoring. I think many of us working as Agile coaches work with one or several teams somewhere in an organization. And yes, we can often coach a team and change culture there, but coaching on team level has some limitations because a team is part of a larger system, the organization that it is part of. Like Christina mentioned, we need to work with the whole system. In the heart of the competency framework, we as coaches bring an unconditional positive regard, meaning that we believe that people want to do the right thing, people want to contribute and always do their best. I think this is something all of us, independent of role, can think about. Do I bring an unconditional positive regard about myself and my colleagues to work? And how do I show up when I go to work? Another question is, how in sync with your beliefs and values are your actions? If we, for example, believe that we are all leaders, independent of where we are in an organization, we will probably take responsibility in a completely different way than if we believe that we have to wait for someone to tell us what to do. The values and beliefs influence how we act, and many of us are unaware of how much this actually influences us. In my opinion, trust is the real core value that must be in place. If you have trust, these other values will be strengthened. It's easier to be transparent if you trust your team and colleagues. If you have trust and transparency, it's easier to feel safe in the working environment. And because we have trust, transparency, and safety, we will collaborate in a better way. So if you are a team member or a developer working in a team, how do you experience trust or lack of trust? When there is lack of trust, for example, we can experience this in the form of micromanagement, command and control. People doing the job will not be involved in the process until the very end, when they are just assigned a task. And discussions might happen behind closed doors, and there is no openness, no transparency. And the team members might feel this lack of trust, and you might see lack of motivation, disengagement, resistance and opposition to management decisions. And you may also see lack of collaboration between team members and competition between team members. So how can an Agile coach help you to enforce these values in your organization? Let's take a look at some few but simple and powerful techniques that can help you enforce these values. To improve trust, we have a number of techniques we can use when coaching teams or leadership. One of these is the team canvas. It's a definite favorite tool to get the team aligned and work on trust between team members, because you get a lot of good discussions and alignment on things that matter in our day-to-day job. The topics that are discussed, you can see them here. It's people and roles, common goals, and also personal goals. We discuss about the purpose. Why are we here at all? Why are we doing what we are doing? Strengths and assets, weaknesses and risk within the team, and also values. Important to have some sort of agreement on what values are important for the team, and also what are our needs and expectations from colleagues. And finally, what rules and activities do we need to have to work in a good way? If you go to the teamcanvas.com, you will find a description for this team canvas and also a simplified version. So you have a lot of good guidance there so that you can run this workshop yourself if you want to try it out. And it's recommended some timing for the different topics on the canvas. And the experience I have from running this workshop is that you would need to add maybe 3 to 4 times what is suggested on the teamcanvas.com, because it's good to have some time to discuss this properly once you run this workshop. So this is one technique that you can use to work on trust and establish safety in your team. Another technique that is commonly used to build trust and safety is retrospective. It builds trust and safety because you have these, by having these sessions, we create that holding environment where people can discuss what is working well and what needs to change. If you work in a fixed team, it's good to vary the different types of retrospectives that you run. And here you have 3 examples of techniques that you can use. The first one on the left side, let me see if I can point here, is the proud and worried. And the areas that are discussed here is tech and process. So you can, of course, change the topics to whatever fits your team and use this type of retrospective. And the second one in the middle here is the sailboat. So it shows that the wind is what speeds us up, the anchor what slows us down, the rocks are the risks, the island is opportunities, and the sun is appreciations. And the third example is the plus and delta, things you liked and things you would like to change. So you can, if you want to see these descriptions of how you can run this type of retrospective, you can go to RetroKit from Spotify, and you get a good description on how to run this. What I would say when you run a retrospective, it's important to have focus on the actions so that you actually work on solving the actions that come up. Use voting and focus only on the most important topics that you can solve within your own team. And if there is one agile technique that you always use, this is the one. And half an hour a week is enough to run a retrospective. And if you do it frequently, focus on the most important thing that you can solve on your own. This is a very good technique to build trust, build safety, and continuous improve. So now I've showed you a couple of techniques that you can use to build trust and safety in your team. And I would like to ask you if you know any other tools and techniques that can help to build trust and safety. So you can go to menti.com and use the code 151077 and answer the question, do you know any other tools or techniques that can help you to build trust and safety?
Yeah, so basically it would be really good to hear from you because seeing as me and Andrea are the only ones allowed to talk, it's hard for us to know. I mean, you probably know a lot of good tools and techniques that you would like to share. So we hope that you will share them with us now, either just by a word or name or an explanation, and then maybe we can all have some inspiration to try something new after this talk. Cool. So design thinking is mentioned. It's definitely really good. And as we said, also more on the opening up the space to be able to see different, or to actually find the problem that you're going to work on. So that is really, really good. Any other tools or techniques that you use, sort of get the kind of culture that you want? Cool. This is something I need to look up later. It says participatory design. I don't know what that is. So then, yay, I got inspiration to learn something new and check it out. Thank you. So let's see, it's late in the evening, but maybe we can get a couple of more techniques so that we can all have something that we want to try out tomorrow. Yeah, that's good. Feature-driven development. And again, if you want to learn more, I guess we can just Google this afterwards. That's a good one. Questionnaires monthly. So you can send them out. And I guess you could do them both anonymously or like with name. Depends on how you want to use them. But that is really a good way to see how people are doing. So that's good. Weekly weather reports is another one. It says weekly info from leaders. That's really good to help with the transparency anti-pattern that we talked about. Because sometimes it's very strange. Like when you're part of a meeting, you think that everyone else has the same information as you do, but most of the time they don't. So that's really good. See if we can get a couple of more. Oh, one more. It says information, clarity and openness. Acceptance, good one. Yeah, lunch and learn. That's also, or at least if you, it could be a very like low, I don't know the English word, lavterskel, offer to have a lunch and learn. That's really good to help on sharing information and knowledge. Okay, good. That's really, really good. So I hope that you all got some tools or techniques that you can look up later and maybe try even tomorrow.
Great, thank you. So we talked about trust and safety, And we also have techniques for transparency, which I guess many of you know. In the book Rethinking Agile, Klaus Leopold introduces something that he calls flight levels. Flight levels describe how high an airplane is flying. And depending on the flight altitude, the degree of detail that you observe on the ground will change. Each flight level has its own characteristics and advantages, but also some limitations on what can be seen. If we see the example here on level 1, the flight level 1, which is the operational level, you have individual team boards, and the team will only be able to see what's happening inside that team. If you go to the next level, level 2, which is end-to-end coordination, you will see, for example, here for this initiative, it will have, if it will impact several teams. You have this line here that shows there is a dependency to this team, a dependency to the team here, and a dependency to this team. So within the team, it's not possible to see those dependencies, but from the second level, you can see those dependencies. And on level 3, you have the strategic portfolio. And from here, you can see which initiative is dependent or has a dependency to that strategic topic. So the thing here is that the technique is very simple. It's transparency. It uses boards to describe the process on the different levels, but you have the visualization of the dependencies between the different layers that allows you to see how it impacts on different levels of the organization. So I really recommend this book, Rethinking Agile. It's a very simple to read book with lots of good illustration, and it describes this in a very good way. Before you do this visualization, you can map out your value stream. A value stream map is a lean manufacturing or lean enterprise technique that is used to document, analyze, and improve the flow of information that you need to produce a product or service. It gathers and displays a broad range of information than a typical process map. And it is used to identify and remove waste in your value stream. So once you have done this exercise, mapping out your value stream, you can remove waste from this process, and then you can design your workflow, which is the improved workflow, and use these flight levels to visualize the dependencies and the different levels. The last value, collaboration. How can we improve that across the organization? As you can see here, number 1, it starts with leadership. If we as coaches can choose, we would choose to start with leadership. To succeed with Agile, leadership must change, the mindset must change, and the first team that needs to change within an organization is the leadership team. And the diagram here shows that leadership starts with initiating some change in structure, and they do that by co-creating the now situation. So, for example, they might see the need to improve the continuous delivery and will support a team to establish that. And that can be defined as an experiment because you do it for one part of the organization within one specific area. And then you run that experiment and you review the experiment. And if it works, you can use this in other parts of the organization as well. And then you have changed the structure, which influences the culture. And again, the leadership will continue to change the structure working in this way. And as Christina talked about in the start of this presentation, to build an agile culture, we must be curious, experiment, learn, and develop. And this is a technique that you can use across the organization, starting with leadership. So to summarize, an Agile coach can help you in all of these dimensions to support your journey by bringing in a toolbox that can be used in your situation and in your journey where you are at the moment, and bringing in also the unconditional positive regard. And what can you do tomorrow when you go back to the office? Which tools and techniques can you try out? We have talked about the team canvas. We talked about retrospective and taking responsibility for action points, visualizing work and identify your value stream and your policies. And most important, living your values that enforce the Agile culture as well: trust, transparency, safety, and collaboration. I've added the references here if you would like to note them. And then now there is time for Q&A.
Thank you for the great talks. I'm sure people learned a lot. And we got a couple of questions. The first one is the immortal one. Can you share slides so we can share it with the community?
Yes, we can.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. And now this is a comment and the question together. To change Agile culture, you need to change financing models, removing completely the need to the projects, and to prove that cross-functional product teams with freedom do deliver. What are your thoughts about that?
That's a big question.
Yeah. And I can maybe just go back to this slide again and show this, because this is kind of what we talk about when we say start with leadership. The change has to be driven by leadership. And the leadership is the one that can actually change these kind of structures. So this is, and back to the house that Christina showed, the vision. Why do you want to change? Tie it up to that and work on changing structure, having the same view of where, what is your now situation, and define experiments and run the experiments. So it's about like making the changes small enough so that they are manageable, and you can change the structure in smaller pieces. Do you have anything to add, Christina?
Well, we could talk about this forever, but I think it's a really good, I don't know if it's a question, but it's a really good comment. And I think that is maybe one of the things that I've learned over the years, that I started to look at this as just a method that we use in our teams, right? But there are so many things in the environment that needs to sort of click to actually make this work the way that we want to. And you said the financial models, that's one of the things. And I think that from a team perspective is quite of a big task to try to change the way that we pay for the things that we do in our company. So that is why the values and also we need to sort of focus on the whole process. And there are a lot of discussions on projects or not projects, but I still think that the most important thing is the way that you work, not what you call it, if you want. But financial models is usually a big blocker to really become agile, and is one of the places where we see that you need to actually change the way that you work in the whole organization, and why I think this topic is so interesting, because it affects so many things. So yeah, I think our thoughts is that it's very accurate, and it's a big work. And as Andrea said, you can use these models to sort of do it one step at a time and experiment and see what works.
Yes, thank you for the answer. The next question is, what are your thoughts about non-technical team leaders versus autonomous product teams, where everyone is a leader, and how can a team leader avoid being more of an overhead within a team?
That's also a good question. I think that some teams don't need a team lead. They are truly self-organized, but a team doesn't just become self-organized from day one. So at least from my experience, or experience, usually in the beginning of building a team, you need a team lead more, and whether that person is technical or not, well, it could make a difference, of course. But I think that if that team lead should provide with value, it's about the making people awesome, so that they basically help wherever needed and sort of is the glue that makes everything flow good. So I think that if you're a team lead and you want to provide value, you should focus on where things stops and where you can help, basically. And then I think that after a while, when a team is mature, you might not need that role that much, because most of the people in the team will take that responsibility by themselves. But it might not happen in the beginning. I don't know, Andrea, you probably have some thoughts on that topic as well.
I think it might be a benefit to know have some knowledge in the technical things, but it's not really necessary if you focus on values and helping to remove obstacles, because I think much of the work that the team lead can do is to kind of help the team to be self-managed, right? As you say, when the team matures, the team lead might not be that necessary, because the team feels that they can make their own decisions. They will remove their obstacles, and they will work on solving the issues that come up. So yeah, I don't think it's a requirement, but it is a benefit to have some technical background.
I think it really helps in understanding the context of the team. So it's very hard to help people if you don't understand what they're working on or how they're working. So at least for me, I think I would have a really hard time being a team lead without having so many years as a developer previously. But then again, that's the only thing I know. So yeah, but for me, I would say that it's at least very helpful to understand the context.
Yeah, definitely helps.
Yes, thank you. Another question is, I wonder how you as coaches can help teams with internal conflicts where developers simply do not communicate by holding on to their stuff.
Well, I actually think that we talked about trust and safety. And I think it's really important that we actually talk about the things that doesn't really work, and making sure that we take the time to find out what is causing these things, and actually are able to talk about it. And the team canvas, I think, is a good tool for like creating that space to be able to talk about things that are not working. And this is a tool that you can use with some time in between, like not as frequently as you would do the retrospective, but for example, every other month or every quarter, you can have this type of exercise that helps enforce that trust and safety within the team, so that you can actually be able to talk about these things in a more neutral way. But I think it's important to be able to talk to each other and solve the problems. So simply just not be afraid of bringing up the difficult things as well.
I think that's a good point, to not be, I think conflict could be good. So not to be afraid to, I mean, sometimes at least my initial reaction would be to try to sort of, no, there's no conflict here, nothing to see, and sort of try to not acknowledge the conflict. But that could actually be the thing that brings us forward. So I think, as Andrea said, if what a coach can do in that setting is to create the space to make it safe, to discuss and to help in resolving it. And that could also mean one-on-one talks, not always the whole team, because not everyone is comfortable with that. So basically trying to see what is needed and help out, and actually also sometimes let the conflict happen, but within a safe space.
Thank you. And the last question which I have here is, how do you measure if the agile transformation is working or not?
I'll give that to you, Andrea.
I was waiting for you to talk about measurements, Christina, your favorite topic. I think you can measure in many ways. I think if you look at, for example, the flight levels that we talk about, you have some very simple things that you can measure on, which is the lead time. How much time do you spend from start to finish on a certain thing, like an initiative, or it could be a simple task. So you can measure just that one thing, lead time. Of course, you have to define when is your commitment point and when do you actually deliver to the customer. So that is something for the organization to learn. But also, I think it's if you think like technically in the solution, what we want to have is early feedback from the customer. So of course, making the tasks small, but also when you write code, ensure that you can measure the impact that your new functionality had when you publish it to the customer. Is it used? How much is it used? And ask the customer for feedback so that you can see how your product actually solves the customer problem, because the feedback that we want is from the customer. So I think actually making sure that you include that in your process, how for each functionality that you're working on, how are you going to measure and know that this experiment, if you would like to call it that, actually solved the issue for the customer. Because you had like an, I don't find the right word right now, but you had an hypothesis that you want to test, and you test it out, and then you learn from that, from the customer, from the production environment. So you have to actually write some code to make sure that you get that feedback from the customer as well. And you can use questionnaires, of course, and measure the customer satisfaction.
I think if there's one, lead time I would agree on. And also the book Accelerate has a lot of different like categories where you can measure. And some of them are hard numbers, but I think that the soft facts are just as important. So how are people doing? Are they happy? Do they have fun? So it was mentioned as techniques earlier from you, like some questionnaire or like a health check. Spotify has one, which is called the Squad Health Check, that we've used a lot, which you could also sort of help you, because I'm a little bit skeptical to measurements, because you get what you measure, and say you only measure the hard stuff like speed, you might not see that your people are not happy. So if you do measure to see whether your agile transformation is on the right track, I hope that you measure both the hard and the soft, so to speak. So also sort of add, how are your people, how's everyone doing? Are they happy, and do they feel like they're in charge of their own workday?
Yes, thank you for the answer. Unfortunately, we are approaching the end of the meetup. It's really unfortunate, because it's super interesting what you have presented to us, and I'm sure that people learned a lot. And I would like to thank you so much for joining us tonight, finally, after the long months in isolation. And this was our first online meetup, and we are planning to organize more. So, dear community, please follow us on our social media to see what we are bringing to you. And now I would really want to thank you again, Andrea and Christina, for being with us. And I hope we will meet soon.